Welcome to day number 4. Welcome to day number 7.
Day number 12.
Welcome to Do It Heartily.
He quoted a verse that he knew. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Well, after the evening meal at the missionary's home in Manila, Doming went with his sisters into the living room where a missionary read from the Bible and prayed. Doming trembled. He felt like he could not pray. But when the missionary from his town came and sat next to him, he put his arm around Doming's shoulders, and somehow the words came out, and Doming prayed. He said, God, thank you because Jesus is your son who died for me. Help me to grow up and do whatever you want me to do and to tell others about you. But first, dear God, would you help me to tell my grandfather? Doming started to cry. He would be very angry, but he is very old. Please don't let him die. Please make me be brave so I will tell him the gospel and he will be glad that the truth of the gospel entered into his ear. Doming was praying just like Paul, that God would give him the ability and the opportunity to share the gospel with others. Well, that night, before he dropped off to sleep, a voice at the door said, Doming, would you like to hear the rest of the story? He turned and said, oh yes, because there at the door was the missionary lady who had already told them the story back at the school. And she told him the rest of the story about the little Mexican boy, and it had a happy ending. The boy was able to also win his father to the Lord Jesus. Doming thought he must have been so happy. I wonder if God would let me win grandfather to the Lord. Well, the minor birds in the mango trees were chattering away as Doming and the missionary drove past. Doming was hoping that one day he would also have a pet minor bird. They were big and black, and he wanted one very badly. He knew the best way to feed one. To feed a minor bird that's a pet, you give them a hard-boiled egg every other day, cucumbers, and chili peppers. He had been told that the hotter the peppers you feed your bird, the more he would sing. And before it would be a long time that he would have a minor bird. We must hurry back to our village, the missionary said. Today is a fiesta. Doming had been so interested in the new sights and sound, he forgot that today was a special day in his village. They were also having a special day. Now his heart beat faster. Fiestas were exciting, but one thing at fiesta Doming did not like. The men drank tuba, which was an intoxicating drink made from the sap of a coconut palm tree. If grandfather drank too much of that tuba, as he often did at the festivals, his mother would be in danger, and he would too. When Doming and the missionary arrived late in the afternoon, Doming was glad to see his mother unharmed, and tears came to his eyes, and he said, where's grandfather? Well, he's gone to the cockpit to watch the chicken fights, Doming. He'll gamble away all the money he has in his pocket because he's been drinking too much. Mother, does he know about our being a Christian? Doming's mother shook her head. I was afraid to tell him, but I've been talking to Rosa and her mother. Soon we're going to have to tell him. We've got to start going to church now that we're Christians. Doming raised his eyebrows and said, I'm going to find grandfather right now. Well, don't stay too long, son. I'll go back and make some cookies to eat for you with your supper when you get home. Then you can be sure I won't stay long, mother. Doming thought about those cookies that were fried in pork fat. He said that they're delicious. Well, the chicken fights were almost over when Doming arrived. The sun was beating down over the mountains. It was a sign that the chicken fights were about to stop and the evening fun was about to start. Doming pushed his way through the crowd. One of the roosters was almost dead. Yet the men were laughing and shouting, urging it to keep fighting. Each of the chickens had spurs fastened to their claws. Somehow it made Doming feel sick to watch. His grandfather did not see him, so Doming turned to walk away. He said to himself on his way home, let not your heart to be troubled, neither be afraid. As darkness fell, a band of musicians marched through the village. The children followed them. They had instruments of all kinds. Marching in front of them were people dressed in all kinds of stuff. The people were in fancy dresses on stilts. They danced in the streets. Doming sat in his house with his mother watching everything, and he said, do you want me to help you, grandfather?" as grandfather approached the house. "No, I don't want any help. Get off me," grandfather shouted. "Just keep out of the way." Domingue gasped when he saw grandfather was carrying his knife in his hand. Oh, if grandfather slipped and fell, something would happen. He prayed that God would keep grandfather safe. Well, grandfather's knife fell to the floor with a great clang as he dropped onto his sleeping mat that mother had laid out for him, and almost at once he fell fast asleep. Domingue and his mother sat in the doorway talking about Manila and all the things he had seen during his visit. Then they talked about their newfound joy in the Lord Jesus, about belonging to God and having their sins forgiven. Domingue rolled out his own mat and then fell asleep. Both of them were following what Malachi chapter 3 verse number 16 says. Then they that feared the Lord spoke often one to another, and the Lord hearkened and heard it. And a book of remembrance was written before him for them that feared the Lord and that thought upon his name. Domingue tossed from side to side. He had gone to sleep with fear in his heart. Grandfather was to be more feared than ever after he had been drinking the tuba. He started to dream dreams, and he remembered what that old lady said to him and his friends while taking the picture. Things in Manila, things about his grandmother, but he woke up and he said, "Don't let your heart be troubled." He was wide awake now, but something was strange. He heard someone talking. It was not his dream, it was grandfather, and his grandfather was staggering around the room shouting. Domingue's cry wakened his mother as grandfather stood over him with his knife in his hand. "Run, Domingue, run," she screamed. Domingue slid down from the edge of his mat and rolled to the floor, but grandfather was right behind him. Just as Domingue scrambled for the door, the knife came down, and it slashed a deep, ugly gash through Domingue's shoulder. Domingue slid down the ladder and he ran down the dusty road, grabbing his shoulder. He was bleeding terribly. He thought first, if I go to Rosa's house, grandfather knows that they're Christians. He'll hurt them. Quickly, he ran inside of the old lady's house, who hollered at them that day as they were taking their picture. The young woman heard him crying and she said, "Come here by the corner." She said, "Your grandfather's afraid of me." The next person that came through the door was not grandfather, but Domingue's mother. She reached the house first. She said, "Grandfather is fast asleep. He fell down the ladder trying to get out of the house, and he is sleeping on the ground. He is so drunk right now, I think he'll be there quite a while. Let me look at your wound, son. You are badly hurt," she said. The old woman looked over and she said, "Here, help me. I have some special sap that can seal this wound. It almost cures anything, but this cut is so deep. It is very, very bad," she said.